All right. Welcome to another week of the Gen X guys. It's myself, JD, with Len, of course. Um, we've now done what six episodes, so we're still going strong.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Like,
we're just, in a habit now or something. I don't know. What if
well,
you
I
have
mean, I don't know. It's a
always have
good
nothing
thing.
better to do?
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
That's the best attitude right there.
right? We're just talking
Well,
about apathy and everything. Ah, fuck it. We'll just keep doing it. Why not?
yeah. Why not?
What
Why
harm
not?
is it? You
Gives us
know,
something to do. I mean, as you get older, which is kind of going to be the theme today. As you get older,
as you get older,
what the hell happened?
I
Like,
don't care about
re-
anything.
like recently. I mean, when you're young, you get little injuries, you're fine, whatever. And you even tell your kids, man up, you're fine. Like rub some
Right.
dirt on it. That old
Man
concept.
up. You said that to your daughter?
Yeah, man
Yeah.
up. I'll say it. I don't care. Man up.
Actually, your sister would have said it even worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. She would have.
But actually, that's the whole thing. Like, man up is really it's just a general term. It's like saying guys, which is kind of fucked up because there's always a masculine thing. We don't have anything that's like a feminine thing that's like a
You
generalization.
go gals. I mean, if you want to switch around, hey gals, let's do this.
I wouldn't care.
I mean,
I've been called
it,
a lot worse.
that's true.
I
But
mean,
I mean, if you really want to like not care, then just every once in a while instead of saying, "Hey gals," when it's
I should.
all guys and see what happens.
The worst part is I have no problem doing it. I'll just forget.
Yeah, that is true. Which is
That's
another
the only
problem
problem.
of growing old. Memory.
Do you think it's really memory, or we just don't put any effort in anymore?
All right, so let me tell you this story because I
Okay.
think it's a combo, but it's mostly I think a lot of it's memory. I think because you and I have had shit memory our whole life, so but now it's gotten worse. Like before, the memory was to your point. Like I compartmentalized something as like, oh yeah, whatever, and it went in a box and disappeared. Like I probably didn't even listen, which is probably what I've been told.
Huh?
So recently, yeah, exactly. Being an older person, I went to the doctor because my memory sucks. But I tell him, hey, look, my memory is actually getting, I think, worse.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually forgetting shit that I shouldn't, and they're like, okay, well, let's do this little test, and it's a simple test, right? They go, okay, here's what we're gonna do. They give me 3 words, and they say it 2 times. Remember those 3 words. That's all you gotta do. Remember those 3 words. In my head, I'm saying the 3 words in my head. Then they hand me a piece of paper with a circle on it and go, okay, draw a clock with the time being like 11:30. I go, all right, easy enough. So now I start drawing, all the
The
numbers
numbers.
around. Like I
Yeah.
don't just like quickly draw 2 hands and just
Right.
go, this is 11:30. Like I have to be very specific.
No, it's a fucking clock.
Yeah, it's a
You
clock.
have to
You
know
got
it's
to
a
make
clock.
sure you
You
know
have
what I'm
to.
actually pointing
You
at.
can't have a clock without numbers. I mean, that's
Yeah,
just yeah.
clock without number. I didn't put a lot of effort into the hands. I mean, it's just lines and arrows, and that
Right,
was it.
right.
So I give it back to him, and they go, "Oh, okay, not bad, not bad, great." So what were the 3 words? I only got one.
Yeah.
I couldn't even remember 3 words. I gave him two. One was completely wrong, and one I got right. So this all happened within like a 3-minute time span. So
The thing is, though, I would have failed that even when I was like 20. Because okay, remember
maybe I think your recollection would be a little faster.
a
Now,
little bit, but
because you're there for a purpose, right? This one, you're like I said at the beginning,
true.
when you're compartmentalized, when we're hearing something, yeah,
But,
whatever.
but when I have to be focused on something, like look, and you know this as well as anybody, I was 100% ADHD. Well, actually, I don't think ADHD. Well, like my son's ADD. Like really, I didn't really have the hyperactive as much as I just had the couldn't focus. Which back in the 80s wasn't called ADD. It was just called being,
A jackass, and you're getting
stupid.
detention for not
Yeah,
paying attention in class.
right.
Yeah,
And so, like being able to focus on those type of things, I just never been able to do. But you're right, it is worse. It is worse because it's just one of those things where I don't know. It does just fade from memory or whatever. You do the what was I doing again? What was this like? I think there's even a possibility they're like, what did we ask you to do? Like when you came back to like you said remember the 3 things. It's like, did you ask me to remember 5 things? I probably would have forgotten it like in that way as much
right.
as anything. I just totally forgot what they asked me to do. which isn't that much different than kids.
Dude, I
But
can't even recall what the one word was I got right either. This was like a month ago, so I can't even recall that.
you know what I think it is? I honestly think so the one thing that I've noticed is the cumulative wearing down as we get older. And it's not the age. I don't think it's the age. I think it's the bad habits, the things that we neglect during our 30s, especially. I think the
Why?
30s is
What do you mean
really
by 30s? And what are we neglecting?
health, our well-being. We
Yeah, but how so? Like you're saying 30s. Like, what do you mean by
okay,
health? Like, if you go to the gym, like you always went to the gym,
right?
so
Yeah, but I work on mobility and flexibility? No, and that I
well, you
think
weren't going to get any faster. So I work on mobility.
yeah, but after okay, so here's the story. So for people who know, I was a trainer for 10 years. Almost all my schoolwork in college that I never finished was kinesiology. And I was a power lifter and competitive. And this is back in the 90s. Um, and I've always been well above average in strength. So like benching 225 since I was 15, blah, 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 all that type of stuff. I remember I think I was 45 and I hadn't done a deadlift in probably 2 years. And I went to the gym and I wanted to work on form. So I put on just one plate, which is 135 pounds. And I went to do it and it just felt weird. I couldn't even explain it either. Like it didn't hurt. It wasn't anything like that. It just felt weird. And instead of normally I would have put another plate on and went to 225. I just put quarters on. So went up to 185 and I couldn't move it. And it wasn't that I was struggling. It wasn't that I was too heavy. It was like my body forgot how to fucking move it. Like I just couldn't like activate the muscles to do it. And it was the weirdest feeling. In all my years of lifting since high school, I just couldn't move the weight. It was literally like my body was just like, no, it was like a limiter, like in cars where you get the RPMs up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, nice. Yeah,
The
we've done
governor.
that.
Yeah, the U-Haul governor. Yeah.
You hit the governor. It was like I hit a governor. Like as soon as I went to this weight, my body just like you're gonna.
Yeah, but how long? What had it been since you had done it when you did it at that time?
About 2 years.
Yeah, I mean that's a long time.
It was, but the thing is that as I started to try to work back into it, it wasn't getting any better. And then I started doing the stupid thing where, instead of trying to fix it, I ignored it. Or I gave, those, especially when, in your 40s, you kind of start making those excuses too. Like around that.
Think how many you make in your 50s.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think that where I'm at now, and I don't know if you're at, is it's reality now. It's first of all, we're 50,
I don't think so. I'm so irritated when I go to the gym. Like, so I've had again more medical issues, bad back issue for 2 weeks, and so I didn't go to the gym because I didn't want to push myself.
Right.
And a lot of it's tight muscles, right? Like even in the lower back or the buttocks area, you get tight muscles, which causes pain along the bottom. And so,
sciatica.
yeah, or it could be sciatica, but it could also be just more muscular.
Yeah.
Either way, so I didn't go to the gym, and so for 2 weeks I didn't go to the gym, and then I go back and I start light, right? Because I don't want to just jump right back into where I was 2 weeks prior.
Right.
But even then, I felt like I was tired, like a lot more after just 2 weeks. I'm like, dude, it's only been 2 weeks, so like my expectation is I should be doing better. So I'm not like.
Well, no. The expectation is a different story.
Yeah, there's a reality. I agree with you. There are certain reality. Like, you just
Well,
gotta.
no. What I mean by the reality is when we go to the gym now, half my workout is my warm up.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Half of it is making sure that I'm warming up properly because there are plenty of times where I went in and I'm like, oh, I think I'm okay. Like before I lift or push myself hard, it's I have to know that I can do it, or else I'm going to fail because it's going to hurt, or I'm going to feel tweaked or whatever. And like you said, the worst part is that you get that little tweak in the gym or doing something. And before I was like, all right, maybe pop an Advil or something to help you get through it. And then, it starts to loosen up and it gets better. I'm sorry, Advil doesn't do shit for me anymore.
You're not taking enough.
Yeah, I want to put a hole in my stomach, giving myself an ulcer
Stop,
with
stop, stop.
ibuprofen. Yeah.
Until it happens, that's
Ask your
all.
daughter.
All
Ask your
right.
daughter what happens if you
No,
take too much
we're not gonna
ibuprofen.
ask. We're not gonna ask.
Yeah.
I always
Don't
say
ask.
take
Don't tell.
Advil with alcohol.
There you go.
Done.
Yeah.
Done. Like you're gonna die eventually too because of that. But at that moment in time, all you're worried about is getting that pain down. Boom. There you go.
But no, but with the mobility, that I think also we both work at desk jobs,
Yeah.
and all that sitting. And I also realized even trying to stand, you have to pay attention to that because when I realized that even over the years when I would do a standing desk, I would after a while start like tilting to one side,
Yep.
right? And doing that stuff. And I was wondering why I was actually getting like this major issue on my actually it was more my right side, but it was because when I would stand, I would peg leg on my left leg. And it was
Yep.
more just like a reaction to kind of sit like this with the mouse type thing, but standing. So it's like standing made it just as bad. Or,
Yep.
I would do it because I wasn't paying attention, but the sitting down was what it was. Like it's taken me about 2 years to get my legs back to being respectable.
Yep.
But it was
So
funny
what's
because go ahead.
well, I was gonna say, I mean, bring up the gym, which is always a big problem. And I've never been a big gym guy. That's
Right.
always been a fact. I've been more. I've done the gym more just for health purposes, but I'm not going there to like bulk up and power lift because that's just never really been me.
Right.
Um, but I enjoy going to the gym because it's a way for me to keep my fitness up. Obviously, try to strengthen a bit more and go forward. But my question for you is more aside from the gym, as you age, you start to do things less, right? As we get older, we stop doing things. Is there anything you remember? I mean, maybe it is still the gym focus, but that you used to do back when you were in your 20s, you wish you could do today, but physically, it's just not as easy anymore. That's a tough one, but I'm curious. Anything come to mind?
And something does come to mind because so as you know, I've always been into sport bikes. And look, I don't like cruisers. I don't think going from a sport bike to a Harley is equivalent. They're not the same thing. Like, and I will mess around with Harley riders. I've talked a lot of crap to people who are into cruisers, and but it's not the same thing. It's 100% not the same thing. It's not to me. It's not a logical transition. To me, sport bikes are always about mainly about handling, being able to go through turns a certain way, the handling, the feel, and also like to me, being on a sport bike is a natural feeling. Going back to the 80s, Akira, right? That it to me, it's that like you get this stupid image in your head of how you look on a bike, or when you're doing something, right? Like when you're playing basketball, you probably think that you look like Kareem. Maybe not, but you know what I mean. You have this image in your head that you
Probably not
are.
look like him, but I'm able to accomplish what he
You're a
was
little
able
bit
to do,
lighter
which
than he is,
yeah, with
just a little bit.
Skyhook. I always emulated him for those sort of moves. Yeah.
Exactly. And in your head, you get that fantasy, especially in your 20s. You kind of get that fantasy that of how you look. And for me, on a sport bike, it was always like Akira. It was always that thing, or even
Japanese anime, by the way, in case people are wondering what Akira is.
yeah. Sorry. And they had it was a motorcycle, but it was a futuristic type motorcycle, but it was still a sport bike type look. Or even the weirdest one that I always thought of when I would get ready to go into a turn or something like that was Darth Vader in his TIE fighter going into the canyon on the Death Star. For some reason, like he's messing around with the knobs. I would actually sometimes do that, acting like like you do stupid shit. It's just what you do, right? So anyway, and I still have a sport bike, but I don't really want to ride it on the street anymore. One of the last things that happened is I got into a light accident, and it was one of those things where in the past, I think I would have avoided it. I think I would have noticed it. The guy coming into the carpool lane illegally. It was an illegal lane change, like 100%. And I have my lights on. I actually have these lights that I put on to modulate, so I can turn it on and they flash. So I only do that during the daytime, just to do it. Like at nighttime, I would never do that. But you know what I mean, right? So highly visible, all that type of stuff. But I think in the past I would have noticed that he was going to get over. Like I've commuted over 200,000 miles in my life, 300,000 miles easily in my life. And I think I would have been able to avoid it. But one other thing, I didn't really have the bike set up the way I should have for the street. I kind of just put off doing it and all this other stuff. But I think physically, I just don't know if I feel comfortable doing it anymore, because there's a whole thing. Even if I did track days or something like that, or went out, I'm way more afraid of crashing, not because I'm going to die, because I don't go at that clip, but it hurts, the crashing, not being able to do it. And I also just don't feel like I said, my mobility, on a sport bike, you have to be able to move in a certain way because your body controls how the bike goes.
Well,
Your
yeah, and
axle.
then your mental reaction time. If you're not
Yeah.
reacting quick enough to your example, like in the past, you probably would have spotted that jackass is about to make that move and would have been able to maneuver away.
Yeah.
Like as you get older, reaction time sucks. Like the ability to play even simple shooter games online, like what I could do back when I was like 25 versus what I can do now is night and day.
Night
Like
and
it's, I'm not horrible, but I'm also nowhere near what I used to be as far as understanding how quickly I'm not responding.
Well, that's why, like, for me, like, one of the games I play is League of Legends. And man, because it's not one that I have to worry. Like, you have to react, but it's also more about positioning. Like the type of characters I play is more about positioning and that. So reaction time isn't as vital, and you're not aiming.
Right.
The computer does that for you in that game. But
That
yeah,
is true.
bikes is the big one. Bike is the one that I just don't see myself doing anymore, because it's just not. And again, like I said, I totally get that some people transition to sport cruisers, and I know all the different bikes. It's not that. It's, for me, it was always sport bikes, and it's not to have the fastest bike. I would take a 600 that handles really well over any other bike, or whatever. It's not. I'm not looking for the fastest one. I just want that experience. I can be by myself, but I just don't feel that. I don't feel confident and comfortable doing it anymore.
Yeah.
It really sucks because, as that was, you had gym, but bikes was as big of a part of my life as any other hobby I've ever had.
Yeah.
And, it's something that I can't really do anymore. Or I don't,
Yeah.
I can do it, and I have, but I just don't, I don't feel like I could experience it like I used to.
Well, and that comes with age, right? Like to your point, like taking crashes, falls, whatever it is, right? All those things over time, you start to remember it's like, it's more work than it's worth, right? And so it becomes less of like in the past when you're young, you can bounce back. And of course, the mindset's like, oh, that doesn't matter. I'm fine. I'm good. Let's go.
Yeah.
And you're back at it. Whereas when you get older, you start to realize, oh, well, it's not that you've given up. It's just you've also come to realize what's important, right? Like, and it becomes more like, okay, this isn't as critical anymore in my life. Like I lived that phase, and then I loved it, and I'd love to still do it, but it's not enough for me to keep pushing hard on. I mean, for me, it's basketball.
Of
Like
course.
days of being able to, slam dunk, get above the rim, all that stuff, and play games daily.
Yeah.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
But now, first off, I'm not really. I used to play leagues, even in my 40s. I was still playing leagues.
Yeah, I remember.
But now it's like it's harder for me to, and part of it is also just conditioning, flexibility. To your point would help, not enough to get me back to where I was back when I was 20s.
Of course.
But just stuff like playing. Like I'll go shoot around on occasion, but like the interest isn't quite as there as it used to be, and mainly because the pains always of playing. I mean, I have a lot of injuries from basketball. Hell, you caused one of them with the ankle sprain.
I remember
my own teammate. Len was my own teammate. It was a 2-on-2, and he came running. He was guarding. In all fairness, I was coming over to help, and he just plowed right into me and rolled my ankle so badly. I was actually on crutches. And this is when we worked for Sony, and we had a Sony picnic. I think that weekend.
Yeah.
And it was at a 49ers training facility.
49ers, yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I mean, plenty of injuries on that, and I've always played through them. Like to your point, like I've rolled ankles, and unless they're like really bad, I would still keep going. I've broken fingers playing, and I've continued playing, and then of course I had to have my ring cut off because my finger was now completely swollen.
I remember that.
Yeah. But I mean, back then,
That's
those were a
right.
lot of things I could do. But to your point, like with age, and you can keep yourself in good physical condition too, and still play. And a lot of people my age I've seen, can still do
Yeah.
that. But for me, with the injuries and everything, it just wears on you. That eventually it becomes more of a like I love the game. I'll still play it if I can, but it's like I'm not actively out there any longer because it's just harder to stay for a long period of time. And that's a bummer because I do love the game and I work hard to try and get myself back into shape or at least still be active. Like I'll play actually soccer now, ideally once a week,
Yeah.
but like basketball is still my favorite. So that's one of the things I kind of miss a bit more is
Yeah.
not being able to play actively all the time.
Definitely.
Or even when I do, I play, but I'm tired as shit, like fast. So
But the other thing is like you bring up injuries, especially like rolling your ankle or whatever. One of the things I've noticed is that, and again, I think it's just these things that we've neglected, is that when you hurt one thing, it has this cascading effect. You can't your body overcompensates. Like you start limping, then all of a sudden your back starts hurting, or you can't sit properly, or you do this or you do that because you don't have that other stuff to support that injury anymore. And it makes it worse. And it's one of those things. And I think it's there's the healing rate that we have that's longer, but I think that the other stuff makes it worse because all of a sudden, like your back starts hurting, you start sitting wrong, you start doing this, and then you start getting a crink in your neck. And it's one of those things where it just has that effect where, like you said before, you roll your ankle, whatever, and you start moving around and you start getting back on the court, you start doing stuff, and it starts to loosen up and you start to feel better and you go out and play. That might be like a week or two later. Now it's like, 2 weeks later, you still feel it, but now all of a sudden your back's hurting because you're limping. And then, then all of a sudden this starts hurting and you're like, and it just doesn't go away.
yeah, recovery takes forever. I
It
mean,
does.
it
It,
takes a lot longer. And I appreciate people who are still listening to the geriatric hour right now. But
but the other part is that there are things that we could be doing. Like there's all the mobility stuff. There's stuff that, and look, you have your skeletal problems, which there's nothing you can do. There's not nothing, but I've
there's
also
limits. But you're right. There's things you
I've
can do to
tried a lot of
manage
that
it.
stuff. I
Yeah.
cannot do fucking yoga though. I cannot do any of those things that, like, even doing some mobility stuff for my lower body. I get such anxiety after like 10 minutes of doing it. Like,
Mm.
I'm like, fuck, am I done yet? Like, I'll look at my watch and I'm like, oh my God, I've only been doing this for 4 minutes. Or like, how like you're supposed to do something for like a minute. I'm like
Yeah.
looking at my watch after like 15 seconds. That's my ADD that kicks in. And that is something I wish I can do more. And that's the other thing is doing the things as we gotten older that we have to do.
Yeah.
Like I said, like half my workout is warming up now. And I fucking hate it. Like despise it. It actually just like pisses me off that I have to spend 20 minutes to get properly warmed up now for a decent workout. But like, how much of this would be solved if we just did all the right things, whatever that is. Not just the eating perfect, but also, like the getting up and doing stretches and mobility work,
Yeah.
which
I
how much
mean,
would that actually correct what we have, but we're not going to probably do it because we're dumbasses.
yeah. Well, I mean, all the right things, as you pointed out, right? Like you can do all the right things and still suffer something
So,
that's
of course, of course.
unrelated. So, and it's not saying, oh, just don't bother then. No, do what you
No, no,
do best
just
for
stop.
you.
No, just
Yeah.
fuck it.
Yeah.
What,
Just
what,
give up.
what,
Just give
what,
up
what,
life. Just give up life.
what's the point? Just
Yeah.
give up already. We're dying
Exactly.
anyway. We just why
Like,
prolong it?
like there's certain things that'll trigger shoulder pain or whatever for me now. And sure, I can go to a doctor and get cortisone shots and do
I
that
don't.
sort of stuff.
I don't
But
want to do that.
But I mean, reality is, it's like you just readjust. Like to your point, like sure, eating better would always be good, but at this point in our lives, we're old. Like you have to enjoy life. Like I'm not
Right.
gonna starve myself just so I can feel like, oh, I look better. Now I'm fucking hungry and I hate it because I couldn't eat what I wanted to.
Right.
That aside, that's more of a like I say, people need to do what they feel is best for them,
Right.
whichever direction you go. But when it comes to like aging and all that good stuff, what is something you've picked up that you've known from an aging standpoint? Like for instance, for myself, like obviously things I used to do in the past, had young kids, so most of my time was spent, taking the kids to their sporting events. Same with you, right? We did a lot of that was around those schools, events, all that good stuff. And now, as I've gotten older, things to at least help me kind of enjoy life, but not, no, I'm not really doing a lot. It's like flying drones. Like I love flying drones because it's a relaxing environment. It's something I can go out, experience what's around,
Yeah.
without having to go on a big ass hike. I can at least, kind of do that experience. Yeah. Um, but it's
With
also
the full
helpful because it
VR
keeps my
with the headset
mind,
and everything.
yeah, but it
Yeah.
keeps my mind engaged,
Okay.
right? Which is sort of a replacement to other things that I've done, to try and keep myself going. So,
Right.
like, is there anything you've kind of picked up as you've aged? Start like you kind of shift from one to another. Like, where have you kind of gone on that level?
What's funny is I've had aquariums for years, both fresh and saltwater, and I've actually got more into doing ponds. So I have about a 1,200-gallon pond that I built, and it's an above ground. It's wood frame with a liner, and I have right now like 3 large koi and a bunch of different varieties of goldfish in there, with plants and things like that. And I've kind of gotten more into doing that, and it's just one of those things where it's like you can just watch them go through the water and just stuff like that. And it's the only thing is that I realize that it's when you're building it and you're creating it is the best part, right? And or you're trying to change something, but I don't know what I really have outside of that. It's like I do walks, which really has helped me, and I think it helps me like disengage my mind. Um, but and I'm gonna go do it. And one of the things that I've been starting to do is solo camping. Like next week, I'm gonna do it. Basically, go up by Mount Shasta, and it's not anything like major. It's just I have a full size truck with a camper shell, and I have an attachment that you add to the back of it to make it so. Like basically, it's like think of having a half tent on the back of your truck.
Mhm.
So I can open up the back, have the tent there, so it's kind of more of an open space. So the bed of the truck is for storage of stuff. I have a mattress in there. I am going to sleep on a mattress and wait. There's no way I'm going to rough it or be a man or whatever. No, I got to be. If I try to do that, I'm not going to be able to move in the morning.
Rub some dirt on it. You're fine.
Right. But and it's really just weird because when I was younger, Boy Scout and everything like that, it's funny that you would go camping on your own, right? Like there were times where like you would set your tent up away from, like sometimes away from the main area or whatever, and it was no big deal. And then what's crazy is as I got older, I got more afraid of doing that.
Mm.
Like, there's like I feel like somebody's gonna go do something or whatever, but like the first night, like you hear everything. Like the first time that I did it last year, I had a hard time sleeping because it's just one of those things where I was just like kind of paranoid that somebody was going to do something or a monster. It's like, I don't believe in aliens or things like that, but it's like that's what
Bigfoot's going to come out. The forest.
exactly. I'm going to get abducted by aliens or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. I also realized I value a lot more of my alone time as I got older. I didn't realize how much that wore on me, and sometimes I would have less patience and less tolerance because, like you said, when the kids were growing up, you were doing something with somebody else or doing something for somebody else. And not that I wouldn't do it, but I think for guys in general, sometimes we do just need that alone time. We need that time to not be selfish, but just to. It's different between men and women, I think. Like my wife will go see her sister and her nieces, and that's her. I don't know what you would call it, but I think that's her like recharge. You know what I mean?
That's her escape from you. Yep.
Well, that's a big one. Yeah, having a house full of only boys, of course.
Yeah. That's a big one right there.
Right. Or when she goes visit her friends and they hang out, that's the time for my wife to do that. I think for men in general, sometimes we just want to be alone. And it's not like a depression thing or anything like that. I don't think it's that. I think it's we want to sometimes get away from that input or something. And that's kind of what I like is that when you go out solo camping, there's nothing, whatever. Like, I will bring something to watch, or even read a book, type thing. But when you're out there, it's just one of those things sometimes where it just feels like a little bit of that load is gone. I
Right.
think I think as a guy, we just want to kind of lift it and be separate, and I can come back. And what's weird is, like, I remember your dad used to do that. Like, he used to go and
But that
I
was
love.
after my mom passed away.
Didn't he do that before as well? I thought he
No.
did that before.
No, no. If he was ever gone, it was for work. Like he'd be
Really?
out in a plant somewhere else in like Morro Bay or other place along the bay to help out. But as far as actually taking a trip on his own, that was only after my mom had passed away.
Really? I thought he did
Uh,
that before.
no, otherwise they always went to Reno or a place
Right.
together to spend
Yeah.
time. But he was always working. I mean, to be honest with you, he didn't really take much time off during work. And then when he retired before my mom passed away, then my mom passed away, and then he needed sort of that separation and to go spend some time. And I'm sure part of that was because she was no longer around.
Yeah.
It's just a way for him to go and, kind of be by himself and enjoy himself. And so he
Right.
spent a week in Reno. And so he did that a lot, to your point. Yeah,
Okay.
later on, but it was after.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, your dad was the type of guy who couldn't, like, work was he his attitude towards work was very different than ours. Let's just put it that way.
Was a different generation, different
Very different.
mentality, right? They grew up in a different way. Like
Yeah.
work, work, work. That's what you need to do to provide. Not that nobody thinks that way, but there were also much limited sort of types of jobs. You either worked with your hands or, which was most jobs, right?
Right.
Back in that day, you worked stores or with your hands. There weren't a lot of desk jobs. I mean, yeah, newspapers, things like that. But
Can you
for the
imagine
most,
your dad at a desk?
well, they did. They at one point he had taken over at the plant,
Yeah, yeah.
and then he stepped
Right.
back because exactly to your point, he realized this is not for me and need to be hands on. So, but yeah, it's a different generation to your point, right? Like his mentality was he was first off he loved building things, so for him that was perfect job.
Yeah,
That's why he picked up woodworking later on and of course he built cars since he was a teenager,
yeah.
right? But yeah, to your
They
point, yeah,
did.
different things. But I agree with you as far as to your point, like being able to take a break, even just take a sec to just mentalize and go do something else because you're always stuck in the same. Like for us, we're working from home all day.
Yeah. I
Like
go
there
in
is no
once a week.
escape from your office. This is it.
Yeah,
So as you get older, you start to miss the ability. Interestingly enough, like I miss going to an office, not daily. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
but at least the interactions and
Well, let me ask you that. So to ask you that, I think it's a generational thing, but the work from home thing, yeah, ever since COVID and working in tech, we had the ability to. I mean, it wasn't a hard transition for us to do work from home, right? Because we had that ability to do that. I did that about once a week or so, even before COVID hit. Like, I do it on a Friday or whatever, but it wasn't a big deal, and we were set up to do it. The transition for us was seamless.
Mhm.
We didn't, but there's that whole debate about going in the office, and I honestly think hybrid is the best solution. I think it gives you the balance because I think people have to also understand that it is also I am a manager, so I do have that aspect. But I don't think it's a check on people. I think the automatic assumption is that we want to come back to the office because of to check on people. And whereas I don't think that that's not true, I think that there's a lot more to it. I think, like you said, there's the biggest thing. Like when COVID first hit, and after a few months, we would do this operations like all hands type thing, and it was this thing where every time we did it, like once a week, is that somebody had to like introduce himself, say a few things about themselves, fun fact, a few pictures, and then what have you noticed during the pandemic and work from home? And the one thing, and I still said it is that I think the big thing you miss with work from home is organic conversations. I don't think Zoom replicates a conversation
Correct.
at all. I mean, you can see it in every meeting where you have that, uh, uh, everybody does that, that stop, that, oh, no, you go. And a lot of that stuff never happens in an office room because there's not that delay. There's not that whatever. But I think it's the organic conversations that what I think a lot of people miss.
Yeah.
Or missing why I think being in the office is important, because there are just times where and again, being in an operations type role, I'll talk to somebody and then all of a sudden somebody else kind of will chime in. And again, that would never happen. Or as you're leaving the conference room, you're talking about something else comes up.
Yep.
And I think those are the things that really miss. I think those, and also you do build relationships with people at your work. And I'm not saying that I'm friends with them outside of work. I don't think I think it's a working relationship that you build a lot more when you're in person.
Yeah.
So I do think that there is a major piece missing. And people who don't see that, what I fear for them is, it's like, if your job is really you just doing this mundane work, or where you don't have to really interact with people, you have to kind of be worried about your job then. Because, then how replaceable are you at that point? And I think that's something that people have to be a little bit aware of, that if your job is just an order taker, or that you don't think that you need to worry about those conversations, you have to you have to look at it from the perspective of the company as well. Like, yeah, I don't want to fucking commute in. I don't like it. I don't like the commute. I don't want that time away, the expense and everything like that. But I do also know that the times that we do go in the office, that we are more productive, that there are things that we can accomplish in the office that we can't as well outside of it.
Well, and so that's where it becomes the challenge from a leadership standpoint, right? Like, to your point, leaders, the CEOs and whatnot aren't necessarily, so they're brought up in a certain world, right? That world for a lot of them was this sort of engagement, interaction with their teams on a daily basis in person, right? And so they may also see that this is being missed when you're no longer in an office all the time. And yes, you're doing through Zoom and all that other good stuff.
Right.
I think part of that is led by the fact that they truly believe that employees, and themselves are missing this sort of interaction. And that's why they need to get back in the office. And then it becomes now a matter of, all right, well, are you as productive? Because that was always the big thing. Like, to your point, we can do our jobs from home. Are you as productive? Hard to say. I mean, some people could be just as productive at home as they are in the office, but there's no way to measure that. Like, there's no way to say it's not working and force people back in. So that becomes the challenge too, right? Like, they can't say it's not, because if you're still delivering shit and shit's getting done, then you're doing your job, right? So in that case, but you're still missing out on quite a few factors. Like, when I go to the offices, when I come in and visit, I feel like I have more conversations with people, to your point, that I wouldn't have on a daily basis. I feel like I can get a better understanding of certain things. I can go find someone and talk to them immediately. And you can pull people in together pretty quickly, just even at a side desk, and chat through things. And that's all missing. That is all missing right now. And there's no way you can't replicate that working from home. Like, you can't. I mean, I've worked way too long, and same with you. And I've been working from home for a long time, since I moved out to Vegas. And I will say that was one of the reasons why I got a job out here in Vegas initially, was because I wanted to get back in the office. I felt like it was just too disconnected, was missing a lot of those things. But I think the hybrid is the key. Like, having teams come in probably 3 times a week, to be honest with you. I think you almost have to, with CEOs will want, because they also have to justify the cost of the places. Yeah, they also have to justify the cost of everything. But if you come in like 3 days tops, I don't think that's a problem, especially if you pick it during, the week that works, then you're good. But they have to come in at the same time. So it loses its luster really quick if you all pick different days and only one of those 3 days you actually overlap on. Then it loses its point. Like, there has to be consistency for it to be useful. And a lot of people who are younger, who haven't necessarily worked in these type of environments for a long period of time, to have that sense of understanding, the connection you pointed out earlier.
Yeah.
Come on. for them, it's not really a big concern. And so that's why it's hard for them to understand why they have to come back in, because they feel like they're doing the job fine. And and again, you can't justify one way or the other that you are or aren't, because if you're delivering, you're delivering. But that's the challenge. That's the challenge between the different generations, is that length of time in jobs will make a difference from your perspective on whether or not you understand the need to come in versus those who don't.
Well, there's also, again, I don't like in this day and age that you have to be 100% on one side or 100% on the other. Correct. Or if you say one thing, that means you're totally against this.
Yeah, it's not a Republican Democrat conversation.
God, yeah, we're not going to get into that type of stuff.
Oh, we will.
By the way, we will, but we hate both. So
well, I wouldn't say I hate both. I'd say
they annoy the shit out of me.
Yeah, I'd say the hardliners on both sides are the problem. But anyway, go with your thought. Go with your thought. Don't get sidetracked too much.
But so, like, when I say this stuff, I'm not, people will say like bootlick or whatever, but looking at it from a company's perspective, one of the hard parts I think as a manager that I have is also justifying headcount at this point. Because my team, and I love my team, except for one person, but I'm not going to go into that. He's not. I'll shut up. But overall, I trust my team and I empower them in all the cliche things. And I think I actually am a good manager for the most part.
Yeah, right. They speak highly of you. I disagree, but they speak highly of you.
That's right, because you work closely with, or you kind of work closely with one of them. But fuck, I lost my train of thought.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, see, that's an old creeping.
Welcome to the geriatric hour. There you go.
No, but it is hard to justify, because if I wanted to add on more headcount, my boss trusts me, and he knows that my team is working at near capacity, which I don't like. And he doesn't either, by the way, which is a good philosophy. But when it gets down to the business side of things, the company's like, okay, well, what is your team doing? How many hours? And I don't need to go down to the minute, but it's still one of those things where I think it's harder to justify the man hours and the work because the flip side is, for me to justify it, then I have to tell my team, I need to see everything that you're doing. I need to know what you're doing down to the hour. Like, how many hours do you spend on this? How many hours do you spend on that? And I absolutely don't want to get into that, because then it becomes this perception of a different type of reason why I'm doing it. But if I don't do it, like, we have our one-on-ones every week, they send me an update, but the update is only supposed to be that high level. Like, I only want them to spend 5 minutes on an update, right? Where they send me a thing of just saying, these are the high level things. And those are usually the things that I'll look at. And if I have a question, we'll talk about it in our one-on-one. But that's not going to justify 40 hours a week or 40 man hours, whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the thing that people who work from home, I always hear these things about, now their manager wants to check on them. I'm like, you also have to look at it from the company's point of view. What does the company need out of you? They're the ones paying you. And also, let's be honest about something. How many people are actually as productive as at home as they think that they are? Everybody acts like my wife, I had to tell her to stop fucking working. Like, she is just a grinder. She's just one of those people that just, if she has to work 40 hours a week, she is going to legitimately work 40 hours a week. Like, work that full time. Almost have to force her to stop, and she goes over. It's just her. But come on, I mean, we would get out of work as much as we could. And how many people can actually say, who work from home full time, work that full 40 hours? I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah, you bring up a good point, right? Like, I mean, so that's a good point. But then I would also flip that and go, how many people who work full time in an office say they're actually spending that full 8 hours doing work?
I agree.
Right. So I don't know if you really gain or lose either way in that sense. Right. To your point, like, I don't think anybody should honestly say they started like from 9 to 5 and all they're doing is work, and they're probably taking a lunch somewhere in between. But that's it. That's all they're doing. Some might be on certain days, and then other days not so much. And it's the same as in an office. You come in, you start to realize you're spending a lot of time around the water cooler talking to other people, and that time adds up, and you start thinking, oh, I accidentally spent like 6 hours maybe of doing any real work while I'm in the office.
Yeah.
It can be similar to when you're in home. So, um, but yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. Like, to me, that's where I always look at productivity of the people. Like,
Yeah.
if you know you're giving them tasks and they're completing them within the time frame you would expect, then they're doing their job. Like, if they're doing it because they spend most of the day doing nothing and then they spend 2 hours later in the evening doing it, that's up to them.
Yeah.
Like, they're still doing it. They just have to be available for meetings when you want them and other things. But like I said, the camaraderie and the connections are what you lose. Like the ability to come up with a quicker
True.
solution or bounce ideas off each other. That's all missing. Like that's just unless you set up personal meetings, which you can do.
It's
But
still
it's
not
like,
the same, though.
yeah, you just can't walk up to someone and go, "Hey, I was just thinking about this. What do you think?" And then chat it out. Like that's just not really an option.
And I think that I think that's the reason why hybrid to me works, because I don't think there's a right answer. And I'm not saying what I said earlier is set in stone, or that's what I believe. It's just one of those things. It's part of the thing. And like you said, you have a very valid flip side to that. It's like, oh, well, am I more productive, or am I is there employee health, mental health, and all that with the commute, or being in the
Mhm.
office and you feeling that way? Like there are times where at home it's nice for the fact of, and you've had it where all of a sudden you do 4 hours of meetings in a row, right? People will look at your calendar and go like, "Oh, I could fit in a half-hour meeting here." I'm like, "Great, now I have back-to-back meetings
Or,
for 6 hours."
or they overlap with your meeting, just assuming it's free.
Yeah, fuck it, why not?
Yeah.
But there are times where it's nice that I can add in a meeting for 30 minutes on my calendar and then go into the living room and sit on the couch and watch something on YouTube or something for that 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So and so like I said, I'm not a I believe both sides have very valid points. That's why I think hybrid is the best solution. You
Correct.
allow for those times, and I love that at work we have like the no Zoom Fridays. When we
Well,
were doing that.
some people we work at the same company,
Yeah.
and that does not apply for me. That's something maybe your group does, but that is not something every group does. That's for sure. But
Oh, yeah, I think it's just operations, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I've had that at other companies where even when we were in office, we wanted to do
No
no
meetings
meeting
are Friday.
Friday, right? Like just no meeting Friday. And generally that works. There's always one person who just ignores that rule anyway because they're like,
Oh,
it's the
we
only day
love
that's open.
yeah,
It's like there's a reason why it's the only day that's open because it's
yeah.
supposed to be.
It's supposed to be open.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. Those are helpful because then it gives you a chance to catch up on what you need to do. Because if you're spending your whole week in meetings, which can happen for a lot of people,
That's so painful.
it's like when are you going to do your job, right?
And
Like when are you going to actually complete your work?
I actually think that that's also a negative side effect of work from home. I brought this up a while ago at work, is that I think that because of the work from home and because of just doing Zoom, that we have more meetings than we
Yeah.
used to. I think overall, like there's this whole push that you've seen, and like you said, like no Zoom Fridays, people fucking ignore it, where they say like, before you have this meeting, you have to set out a specific agenda, and
Right.
also what are you trying to accomplish with the meeting. So like basically say that you're not just have a meeting for the sake of meeting. Like I had to talk to one of my people because they had this meeting, and it was one of those meetings of like, well, what was the purpose of this? Like it didn't actually, it literally was like after 10 minutes, it was like it had that feeling like this was a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
And I do think more so than before, and maybe I think people try to do it to justify their time. Like if I have these meetings, it makes me look busy. Like it reminds me of, like, I wasn't always a big Steinfeld fan, but George Costanza was saying like like I think he was working for the Yankees at that time.
Mhm.
And he was saying like he had no work, but everybody thinks he's busy just by going if you just do that, people will assume that you're busy.
Right.
And I think the new one for that is setting up meetings, because I think half the meetings I go to are worthless. Like I really do think that
Yeah.
they're not productive. Like
Well, so
email would work.
yeah. Well, And to your point, like I can use meeting spots to block time off. To your point,
I
like I'll
do that
do
all
that. And then as far as meetings go and the growth over time with Zoom, I agree with you. Like that's one of the points, making earlier was like when I'm in an office and I have a thought, I can go find the person, talk to them real quick. I don't have to put a meeting aside, which you have to do today because you don't know if they're free and
time.
they may not even be available right at that moment. And using tools like Slack and others are helpful, but those can also be a detriment because the way you're explaining it through Slack could be misleading and it leads to more Slack conversation,
Or
which suddenly you spend a
limited.
lot of time.
It's
Yeah,
limited too.
yeah, it is limited. And but I would say for you in particular, to your point being in management, that increases your level of meetings. Like from my time from a management level as well, the higher up you go, interestingly enough, the more meetings you have, whether it's one-on-ones or whatnot, but
Mhm.
just more meetings with leadership, which tend to generate nothing in the end, a lot
Absolutely.
of conversation and not necessarily generate meaning like
Or
it's
they
just a
generate
bunch of
more meetings.
blowhard. Yeah, just a blowhard talk and there's really nothing to do. There's things to do, but you still have to continue to talk about it because it's a progressive situation. And so it's constant meetings. And I'm back in my days working at IGN. I spent a lot of times in meetings. At Pandora, a lot of times in meetings. And I think there's only been a couple companies recently that I've worked for where I spent less time in meetings. Um, but depending on your level, also intensifies that. Like a person on your team who's just handling, support tickets or whatnot, probably less likely to have many meetings at
Right.
all in a day versus you who's got one-on-ones, leadership meetings, future, next year's roadmap, planning, anything you want to throw in there. All those are going to add to you. So your level, and I don't think that's changed to be honest with you
No.
over the years. It's like it depends where you're at and what your focus is, but I agree with you 100%. Like the Zoom concept or the increase in meetings with the pandemic or even after the pandemic today is purely driven by people's need to one talk to you. So they're going to increase your meeting intake because I'm sure it'd be a lot less if you were
And off
in
totally.
office. Exactly. And that's where hybrid would help most days. Not every day because the days you're probably not there. If you do it in office, probably would help. But I would expect it at least alleviate some of those pains.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, you're right. It's Zoom has created the pandemic created more meetings through Zoom, and
'Cause like
they
you said,
lack the excitement or the conversation lacks any real texture behind it. And a lot of times you just feel you're sitting there.
well, like it was last week, I went in and one of the people who does a lot of our data analysis type stuff, I went to get coffee and I walked past her and then she asked me this question and we had a 10-minute conversation before I got back to my desk. And honestly, if we were work from home, that would have been a meeting.
Yeah.
It would have been
Or a Slack conversation, which may or may
like
not have worked out.
it wouldn't have because there was some like she showed me some stuff on the screen. So
Mm.
it was one of those things where just by looking at her screen, she showed me like two things and we went over it. The context of that was again, she could have screen shared, but again, it's not nearly as efficient as being a person.
Right.
But and again, to anybody that says that about like that, oh, I just want to come in or whatever. I have a commute. My commute door to door is 2 hours each way.
That's a choice you made to live out there.
No, you're right. It's the circumstances that
Stop blaming
I
stop blaming
where the fuck
traffic.
did I
Blame yourself. Blame
stop.
yourself.
It is. I'm not going to say that, but I do have 2 hours each way, and so trust me when I say, and I've had worse commutes. When I was working for Yahoo in Sunnyvale, I
Mm.
used to take Amtrak down, which honestly I do kind of miss that commute. But that was 2.5 hours each way. Each way was minimum 2.5 hours.
Why
But the
so
thing is, I used
goddamn
to be able to,
long?
huh?
Why so long?
That one it was Amtrak. It was just slow.
Mm.
But the thing is, I used to be able to kind of work on the train, and when I was at the office, I was only there for like 6, 7 hours. So it wasn't like my whole day was, it was
Sure.
almost a normal time of day. But fuck, I miss Amtrak because we used to be able to sit down. They had Wi-Fi. The seats were comfortable. They had bathrooms. It was actually not a bad way to commute. But so no, I mean, I'll say that the commute, but it wasn't cheap. That was
Yeah.
the one downside. I actually enjoyed it and wasn't, like I said, I was able to come into the office late and leave on early-ish, so it worked out overall, but it was expensive. So I completely side with all the expense and the time and everything like that that anybody has. I've been doing it for too long.
Yeah.
But I
I
do
mean,
have to have, it's just balance, I think.
yeah.
I think that's what
Well,
hybrid does.
and I agree with you. I mean, that's what things that have to be taken into account is that the travel time. Like
Yeah.
for any job, like if you have to start coming in the office, there's going to be that impact
Right.
having to drive. And so that's also another reason to your point of why people push back and go, I don't want to go there. Well, okay, I get it. But at the same time, the pandemic was never the point where companies said we'll never show up again. Like I
Some
think there's a
did.
missed
The worst part is some
Google did
literally did.
briefly,
Google did.
or at least alluded to that they would. They actually never officially said that, but they
Right.
alluded to that. Like we probably don't need to come in, and they do. They own way too much property and real estate not to have people coming in.
Dude,
But
we work right by YouTube, and they're
yeah,
still building. Like, they're building, like, right next
yeah,
to our building. They're building.
yeah, they want more people. But I think part of it is like people took advantage of the pandemic to go spread out because they figured they'd always be able to work from home. And then, some companies required them to come back and, so they have to deal with that after effect. But for those who stayed and who had gotten the job beforehand, like you knew what the commute was.
Right.
And it's part of it. It still sucks. And that's why I know I can get why there's a lot of pushback to not wanting to go to the office. Definitely 5 days a week. Like I honestly, I've never really believed you need to be in there 5 days a week anyway. Like most of your stuff can be done. Definitely the communication between groups, usually within 3. That's why I say 3 sounds about right. The
Yeah.
other 2 days, you can deal with just your traditional meetings through Zoom, and it's not a big deal. But yeah, in the end, you're right. I mean, for people to come back to work, and as companies do this, and they are, it's just you just got to really think to yourself, like if you're really adamant you don't ever want to go back in the office, like good luck. You'll just have to try and find a job that'll allow you to stay there. Because I guarantee any new company you try to go for, their roles are going to require, unless you look for legitimately a remote only role, but those roles are always going to require you to come in probably as a hybrid.
Mhm.
That's what I've seen a lot of is hybrid. So I would
And
expect
also your compensation is gonna reflect it too.
it is where you live. It's going to make a difference. If you
Like,
decide I want to work remote, like I live in Vegas, Nevada is a different state than California when it comes to cost of living. So am I get paid as much as I would if I was in California? No. Um, would I get paid more? Definitely. I would expect to if I'm going to live
yeah,
in California.
of course.
But you're right. I mean, all that plays into it. So from my perspective, and to kind of wrap this one up, is that just we need to, well, not we, but I guess people just need to
What are you
recognize like
doing now?
you're gonna have to come in some form, and if you don't, you probably need to start finding something else because I don't think companies are going away from bringing you back, and it's just a matter of time.
And people need to stop with they only want us in for this reason. No, I don't think that. I
No,
don't
you have to logically think through the whole thing to your point earlier. Like if you can sit there and,
really
and
look at
not a lot
perspective.
of people can, it's all emotional, which we can go into a whole conversation about emotionally based
Yeah. Oh,
decisions.
yeah.
But if you logically think about it, company has, sees value of interaction in person, and they also have costs. I mean, they have all this real estate. They want to take advantage of it and paying all these things for people. They want them to show up. And so, but they shouldn't force them for the full time, past, like I think it's smarter for them to stick with the 3 days, but we'll see.
I really think like taking Fridays off or from the office, no Zoom, even if like you put in 5 6 hours, but that's the time where you can just kind of be productive, grind through your stuff and get ready, get things sealed up for that week and into the next week. So I'm all for hybrid. I think 2 to 3 days a week is perfect. Spread it around, work it out with everybody, and just understand that there has to be balance between them. That there's positives and negatives to both, and just find out what balance works.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
Well, this has been a great episode.
yeah.
We also showed our inability to stay on point
What was our
from
point again?
age. We went from talking about aging
I'm
out.
sure people are going to be, oh, you're just old boomers, which we're not. We're Gen X.
We're not boomers because if people say that, they don't know what the generational names are.
Yeah, it shows you're
And
a
the name of the
dumbass.
show is the name of the show is pretty much a giveaway. Gen
Right.
X,
We're
and we don't
not-
give a shit what people think.
My older brother's a boomer, not me.
Yeah, exactly. So thanks again for listening this week. Hope everybody enjoyed it as usual.
Sure.
Like and share and comment if you have anything to say. All right. Talk to everybody next week. See ya.